A knitting sheath. I think that a knitting sheath is worth trying, especially if your hands are hurting, if you're gripping the needles too much. So I'd normally knit like this, and my fingers were getting sore because the needle was slim and the yarn was slipping on it and I was gripping it. The sheath holds the needle for me, and now I don't have to hold it with these fingers so that I don't hurt my hands. So the other reason to use a sheath is if you occasionally need to tend to something with your hands, this frees up your hands. So in the past, I have taken a piece of craft foam. I think I actually used floor tile, which is a little bit thinner than this. This is a gardener's kneeling pad. And I had to double it, and I enclosed the needle that way. I folded in half, and I had 2 layers, and I had them tied around somehow. The way they use knitting sheaths often is they stick them in their belt or something tied around the waist like an apron. That holds it rigidly. Well, mine wasn't holding very rigidly, and I didn't like it anyway, and I didn't know why, and I thought, well, that's not worth doing. They say put it on the right side. That's for people who hold the yarn in their right hand so that it frees up their yarn hand. So I use my left hand to hold yarn, and it finally occurred to me that maybe what I need to do is free up my left hand because that's the hand that's going to hold the yarn. And decided it was probably worth trying because in the future I want to hold one color in one hand and a different color in the other hand and do 2-color knitting. So to do that I need to learn to use my right hand to hold yarn. I'm not very good at that. Close the needle that way. I switched to a length of PVC pipe. This was a piece that I had. It was already cut. I did not figure out the length or anything yet. It is stuffed with more pool noodle, but not all the way. Well, I had to really scrunch it up, and I couldn't get it very far in, so I ended up tucking more pieces into this end to stuff it. So now it holds the needle, so there's about that much sticking out. And then I take another piece. You can see the groove that's been made by the needle. I have so far been putting it underneath the needle and tucking it in, and that holds the needle firmly enough. So then I tried tucking this under my arm. Most of the time what I found is that if I rest the back end against the back of the chair that I'm in, that works pretty well. I can't do that in this position. But that means that this rough end is not very good and I should put some tape over it or something because that actually sticks out and tends to catch on the upholstery. So the next version of this will be nicer. I also want to fine-tune the length because sometimes this seems to be poking out too far and sometimes it seems to be too short. So I need to make some length adjustments, and I think that that length adjustment is going to depend on how I'm sitting and what chair I'm in and what's behind me. So I think it needs to actually have an adjustable length. I got to figure something out with that, maybe 2 tubes and some holes for pegging them together at a different height. But also I found that I was putting my hand here, and this was kind of rough on my hand. So I took a pool noodle and slid it over this, and also this is long enough that I can rest my arm against it, and that's also more comfortable. So that's a much more comfortable, having this be really big is much more comfortable. So right now I'm tucking this under my arm, even though that's not how I knit. It's a really awkward position. When I'm sitting in a chair, it's a very comfortable position. Okay, so I'm now wearing a belt, and I can take this and tuck it in the belt, but if I do, this slides in and out. That's not good. Now I have a really long hoop noodle. I don't know how long I want it. I'm tucking that into my belt, and this is amusing. I want it about there. So now I'm going to tuck the PVC pipe in, but I want the pipe about there. So that means the end of the pipe is about here. I'm going to take a skewer and just poke it into the pipe like that. Now let's try putting this in the belt. Now I can cut off most of the length of this, yeah, so the skewer is right about where my belt is. Now that's fairly firm. This is moving around a little bit. So what I'm going to do is cut a wedge of pool noodle and tuck it in here. Get this almost down and then tuck that in so that this isn't sliding out, and it won't slide in because I've got the skewer in the back. When I'm in a chair, it'll rest against the back of the chair, and that'll be better than the belt. So I need to cast on. Ta-da! You probably don't care about the pattern. So pull this needle out, put this needle in, and I do have to scrunch up the stitches a little bit to fit this in. Take that plug, put it in there to make this needle so it doesn't wiggle. Pull this out of the belt a little. See, it needs to be adjustable because this is too far away from me, really. For real knitting, it would be closer to me. Most people would have this on the other side and they'd be holding the yarn in this hand. I've got the sheath on this side because I'm holding the yarn in this hand. And these fingers were gripping the needle too tightly and getting sore, so that's why I wanted to use this. Well, one of the reasons. I also love tools. Did I mention I love tools? I really love tools. I really love tools. Basically, to knit, I just knit the way I would normally knit, except this needle is more like this, and normally it would be out here. Well, why don't I show you that? So I'd normally knit like this, and my fingers were getting sore because the needle was slim and the yarn was slipping on it and I was gripping it. I probably should have changed to plastic needles, but I don't have any of the right size. And the sheath holds the needle for me. I also need an easier way to change the needle. Sticking in this plug every time is kind of tedious. So it's firmly against the stuffing that's inside. And now I don't have to hold it with these fingers. I can just rest a finger or a palm. I can rest my palm here and just knit. And if my yarn gets tangled, this hand is free to go untangle it or to pull some more or whatever I need. And if I am trying to knit while working on something, I can free up this hand to work on something pretty easily. People who use knitting sheaths, they attach some yarn to this and tuck it in their belt on this side, and then the fabric is held this way, and they could actually drop both needles, use their hands, and pick up their work again. So the other reason to use a sheath is if you occasionally need to tend to something with your hands, then this frees up your hands. So the one thing I did want to show you, center double decrease. This is where the knitting sheath is a little bit awkward because I have to point this needle way away from me. So it's kind of awkward to do this decrease. There we go. So, but you see how I had to swing this needle all the way around here to knit those three together. And that's the disadvantage of the knitting sheath, is it holds this needle in a fixed position, so you have to do extra maneuvering with the other needle. Okay. I assume I will speed this up. I put this one in. I use my improvised plug, and I'm ready to go again. That's how I'm using my improvised knitting sheath. And I think I need to cut a new plug. Yes, I think I'm going to do that right now. Why don't I try using the wedge? Let's see if that'll hold it. Yes, that does hold it. That's actually steadier than when I had this. And in fact, my needle is not all the way back. When I put the plug in, it kept the needle from sliding in too far. So maybe a wedge rather than a plug is a way to get a length adjustment. And that way I can adjust the needle here rather than trying to adjust it at the belt end of things, or the back of the chair end of things, or whatever. Need to slide this out a bit so that I don't lose my stitches. I took off the marker and I did not replace it. Here's a way to secure the piece. I also found as I was knitting that this needle was sticking out more, and where before I was resting my hand on the styrofoam pool needle, when it was out I was gripping it again. So I think maybe what I need to do is slide this so it goes farther in so that it's held down here, and the work can kind of slide into the pool noodle so that I can rest my hand against the pool noodle, because this is very comfortable. Resting my hand against the foam while I'm knitting is really comfortable, but this has to be really short in order for that to work. So I'll do some adjustments with my knitting sheath later on. So as a prototype, I'm pretty happy with this knitting sheath. I'm at the end. Now I was going to adjust this. Here's where I put the peg before, and now I want the PVC to slide in a little bit more. The PVC pipe is inside a little ways. Okay, so here's my belt. I'll put that back on. So here's where I've got the blocker to keep the PVC pipe from coming down too far. I'm tucking it into my belt right about to there. I still left enough extra for my belt and for some fudge factor in case I want to move this yet lower. Also for balance. If I sit against a chair, this might be the part that pushes against the back of the chair. I want to be able to adjust that too. The PVC pipe is in here, and it pushes down about that far. And now when I slide my knitting in, the PVC isn't right up here. It's about that much of a hollow, so that my knitting can fit down in. Yeah, see, now I can rest my palm against the foam, and I really like that. I'm still curling these fingers up, but they're just really resting there. Maybe this is keeping this from moving too far, or maybe it's just keeping my hand in place, I don't know. But it's very comfortable. It's not pressing, it's just lightly resting. Yeah, that's much better. Alright, so this knitting sheath, I'm pretty happy with it. I can continue to adjust it. I can park the needle that way anytime I want. Of course, the edge of this will wear out eventually if I keep on doing that, so I probably shouldn't. But it's a prototype, so I don't really care. And eventually I'll figure out what I like, what I don't like, and maybe I'll then try to make a permanent one. But that's the knitting sheath for now. I do think that a knitting sheath is worth trying, especially if your hands are hurting, especially if you're gripping the needles too much. But don't listen to all the websites and experts that tell you that it's always used on the right side. Use it on whichever side you're holding your yarn, because that's the way you're probably going to use it the most. It's not that you need it on the active needle side, it's that you need it on the yarn holding side. I can use it for a while and adjust it and figure out what's important, and then I will put those qualities into the final design. I'll probably use this for part of it rather than the PVC pipe in the middle. I don't know. I will try a few options. I hope I will make another video telling you what I've learned, but I'm kind of scattered and sometimes I put projects aside and don't come back to them. So I'm not promising. I'm just saying maybe. Okay, apparently I can't talk and work at the same time. I have a pool noodle, the needle held firmly enough. More pool needle, and I tried. So I took a pool noodle, a really long pool noodle, wedge of pool noodle, this pool noodle into the pool noodle. So to use the pool noodle, the styrofoam pool needle against the pool noodle, because this hand against the foam. So, the one thing I did want to show you, well, two things I wanted to show you actually. And now I want the PVC to slide in a little bit more, poking that in there. So this is just going to rest right about where my belt is in this particular position. The PVC pipe is inside a little ways. So I'll put the needle in. Oh yeah, that's good, because this is sliding, so there's a little bit of a hollow. Camera overheated and I had to take a break.